The purple sky of Drakmore cast strange shadows across the rocky ground as Lily Brooks knelt beside the crystal pool. Her mother's voice echoed in her head about staying close to the research station. But the girl needed these water samples for tomorrow's experiment. At 16, Lily had already spent 3 years on this alien world, watching her mother study the strange creatures that called Drakmore home. She dipped the sample container into the glowing water, watching the liquid shimmer with tiny sparkles. The crystals beneath the surface looked like frozen lightning, beautiful and mysterious. Lily had always wondered if the creatures here drank this water, or if it did something special to them. Her mother was the scientist, but Lily had her own theories about this world. A deep rumbling sound made her freeze. The ground beneath her feet vibrated, and loose rocks began sliding down the nearby cliff face. Lily looked up from the pool, her heart racing. The sound came again, louder this time, and filled with pain. Something big was in trouble. Against her better judgment, Lily followed the sound. Her boots crunched on the crystal fragments that covered the ground like sharp snow. The rumbling grew stronger, and she could hear thrashing movements behind a large boulder formation. Every survival lesson her mother had taught her screamed at her to run back to the station, but the sound was so full of suffering that she could not turn away. When she rounded the boulder, Lily stopped breathing. A massive shard drake lay twisted on the ground, its metallic blue scales catching the purple light like mirrors. The creature was enormous, easily 20 feet from nose to tail, with razor-sharp claws and teeth designed for tearing through anything, but it was not attacking or hunting. It was writhing in agony. A thick crystal shard nearly 2 feet long was lodged deep in the drake's left nostril. The creature's breathing came in desperate gasps, and its great head thrashed from side to side as it tried to dislodge the obstruction. Purple blood oozed from around the crystal, and the drake's eyes rolled white with pain. Lily knew she should run. Everyone on Drakmore knew that shard drakes were the apex predators of this world. They hunted in the deep caves and high mountains, and their crystalline breath could cut through solid rock. No one had ever survived a close encounter with an adult drake. But looking at this magnificent creature suffering so terribly, Lily could not think about danger. She took a slow step forward, then another. The drake's golden eyes focused on her, and its body tensed. A low growl rumbled from its throat, but it was weak and full of pain rather than threat. Lily raised her hands, palm out, the way she had seen her mother approach frightened animals. "It's okay," she whispered, even though she knew the creature could not understand her words. "I want to help." The drake watched her approach, its great chest heaving with each difficult breath. When Lily was close enough to touch its snout, she could see how deeply the crystal shard was embedded. It had to be causing incredible pain, and if it was not removed soon, the creature might suffocate. Lily had helped her mother with injured research animals before, but nothing like this. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the drake's face. The creature could bite her in half without effort, but something in its eyes stopped her fear. There was intelligence there, and desperation, and a kind of trust that made no sense. The crystal shard was slippery with blood, and it took all of Lily's strength to get a good grip. The drake flinched when she touched it, but held still. She could feel the creature's warm breath on her arms as she worked, and the rumbling in its chest vibrated through her bones. "I know it hurts," she said softly, "but I have to pull hard to get it out." She braced her feet against the rocky ground and pulled with everything she had. The shard moved slightly, and the drake let out a sound that was half roar, half whimper. Purple blood flowed more freely, but Lily could see that the crystal was coming loose. One more hard pull, and the shard came free with a wet sucking sound. Lily fell backward, clutching the bloody crystal, as the drake's breathing immediately became easier. The creature's eyes closed for a moment, and a deep rumbling filled its chest that sounded almost like a cat's purr. When the drake opened its eyes again, they were fixed on Lily with an expression she had never seen in any animal before. It was gratitude, pure and unmistakable. The great head lowered until the creature's snout was only inches from her face. Hot breath washed over her, carrying the scent of metal and ozone. For a long moment, girl and drake looked at each other in silence. Then the creature's long tongue flicked out and gently touched Lily's cheek, so carefully that it barely felt like a butterfly landing. The gesture was so unexpected and tender that tears sprang to Lily's eyes. The drake struggled to its feet, testing its breathing. Air flowed freely through both nostrils now, and the creature's posture straightened with relief. It looked down at Lily again, and she could swear she saw intelligence and memory in those golden eyes. Then, without warning, the drake lowered its great head in what could only be described as a bow. The gesture lasted several seconds before the creature straightened and spread its massive wings. The membrane stretched between the wing bones caught the purple light like stained glass windows. With powerful beats of its wings, the drake launched itself into the air. Lily watched it circle once overhead before flying toward the distant mountains. Just before it disappeared into the evening sky, it let out a call that echoed across the valley. The sound was not the hunting cry she had heard other drakes make, but something entirely different. It sounded almost like a promise. Lily sat on the rocky ground for a long time after the drake disappeared, holding the bloody crystal shard and trying to understand what had just happened. She had helped a creature that should have killed her, and it had shown her kindness in return. Her mother would never believe this story, but Lily knew her life on Drakmor had just changed forever. As she finally stood to head back to the research station, she did not notice the other shapes moving in the distant sky, or the way they seemed to be following the drake she had helped. She did not know that across the galaxy, other species would soon hear whispers of a human girl who had touched a shard drake and lived, but deep in her heart she felt that something important had begun. 3 days had passed since Lily pulled the crystal from the drake's nose, and she had almost convinced herself it was just a strange dream. Almost. The bloody shard sitting on her desk proved otherwise, along with the scratches on her arms from the creature's rough scales. She was sorting plant samples in the laboratory when her mother burst through the door, her face pale with worry. Dr. Patricia Brooks had spent years studying the wildlife of Drakmor, but she had never looked this frightened. "Lily, there's a shard drake outside the station," her mother said, trying to keep her voice calm. "It's been there since dawn, just watching us. We need to evacuate immediately." Through the lab window, Lily could see the creature perched on a rocky outcrop about 50 yards from their research station. Even at this distance, she recognized the distinctive blue metallic scales and the way it held its head. It was the same drake she had helped. "Mom, I don't think it wants to hurt us," Lily said carefully. "Lily, these creatures are extremely dangerous. We have emergency protocols for a reason." Her mother was already pulling out evacuation supplies. "The transport ship can be here in 6 hours if we call now." But even as Dr. Brooks spoke, something strange happened. The drake stood up on its perch and stretched its wings wide. Then it leaped into the air and flew away toward the mountains. Within minutes, it returned carrying something in its claws. The creature landed near the station and carefully placed its burden on the ground before backing away. "What is it doing?" Dr. Brooks whispered. Lily knew she had to tell her mother the truth. The story came out in a rush about finding the injured drake and removing the crystal shard. Her mother listened with growing amazement and horror. "Lily, you could have been killed," Dr. Brooks said when the story was finished. "These creatures have never shown anything but aggression toward humans. But this one is different. Mom, look what it brought us." They watched through the window as the drake repeated its behavior throughout the day. Each time it flew away and returned with something new. By evening, there was a small pile of objects near the station's entrance. When the creature finally settled down for the night on its rocky perch, Dr. Brooks agreed to examine what it had brought. The collection was extraordinary. Rare crystals that her mother had been trying to find for months. Unusual metal ores that were supposed to exist only in the deepest caves. Strange plants that grew in places too dangerous for humans to reach. Each item was carefully placed, undamaged, despite being carried in the drake's powerful claws. "It's bringing us gifts," Lily said in wonder. "That's impossible," her mother replied, but her scientific mind was already working. Shard drakes don't form social bonds. They're solitary hunters with basic intelligence at best. But the evidence was right in front of them. The drake had not only spared Lily's life, it was actively trying to help them. Over the following days, the pattern continued. The creature, which Lily had started calling Ember because of the way its scales caught the light, brought them new specimens every day. It seemed to understand what kinds of things the humans were interested in. Even more remarkable was what happened when other predators approached the research station. Twice Lily watched from the window as Ember drove away the massive rock cats that sometimes hunted near human settlements. The drake's presence had turned their small research station into the safest place on Drakmor. Dr. Brooks documented everything with scientific precision, but she was clearly struggling to understand what she was seeing. The behavioral patterns don't match anything in our database, she told Lily one evening. This creature is acting like it's domesticated, but that should be impossible. Lily had her own theory, though she had not shared it with her mother yet. She was starting to feel like she could sense Ember's emotions. When the drake was content, she felt peaceful. When it was alert to danger, her nerves would tingle with warning. The connection was faint but growing stronger each day. The feeling was strongest when she went outside to collect the gifts Ember brought. The drake would watch her from its perch, and she could swear she felt warmth and affection flowing from the creature. It was like having a very large, very dangerous pet that cared about her well-being. One morning, Lily woke to find Ember acting differently. The drake was pacing restlessly on its perch, occasionally letting out low calls toward the sky. When she stepped outside to investigate, she felt a new emotion from the creature. Excitement mixed with something that felt like anticipation. The answer came within an hour. 3 more shard drakes appeared in the sky, circling the research station. Lily's mother grabbed her and pulled her back inside, but the attack they both expected never came. Instead, the new drakes landed near Ember, and the 4 creatures seemed to have some kind of discussion. Lily pressed her face to the window, trying to understand what was happening. The new drakes were examining the gifts Ember had brought, sniffing at them and making soft rumbling sounds. Then, to her amazement, they began bringing gifts of their own. "Mom," Lily said slowly, "I think Ember is teaching them." Dr. Brooks stared out at the 4 drakes as they carefully arranged their offerings. "This is unprecedented," she whispered. "We're witnessing the emergence of completely new behavior patterns." But Lily felt something else through her connection with Ember. The drake was proud, showing off its humans to the others. She was starting to understand that to Ember, she and her mother were not just creatures to be protected. They were family. That night, as the 4 drakes settled down around the research station like guardian statues, Lily lay in bed thinking about what was happening. The connection she felt with Ember was growing stronger, and she suspected it was only the beginning. She had heard stories about ancient civilizations and legendary bonds between different species, but she had always thought they were just myths. Now she was starting to wonder if those old stories might have been true. And if they were, what did that mean for her future on Drakmore? Outside her window, Ember let out a soft call, and Lily felt the creature's contentment wash over her like a warm blanket. Whatever was happening between them, she knew it was changing both their lives in ways she could not yet imagine. The simple act of pulling a thorn from a drake's nose had started something that felt much bigger than either of them. As she drifted off to sleep, Lily could feel Ember's presence like a guardian angel watching over her dreams. For the first time since coming to Drakmore, she felt truly safe. The attack came at dawn when the 4 drakes were hunting in the mountains. Lily was helping her mother catalog the latest gifts when the first energy blast shook their research station. Through the window, she could see 3 rough-looking ships descending through Drakmore's purple sky. Their weapons already charging for another strike. "Pirates," Dr. Brooks said grimly, pulling Lily away from the window. "They must have detected our mineral samples." The second blast knocked out their communications array. These were not random raiders, but professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. The ships landed in a triangle formation around the station, and armed figures began pouring out of the cargo bays. "Stay low and follow me," Dr. Brooks whispered, leading Lily toward the emergency shelter built into the station's foundation. But before they could reach it, the main door exploded inward, and 3 pirates burst into the laboratory. The leader was a tall man with scars covering half his face and metal implants where his left eye should have been. His companions carried energy rifles that hummed with deadly power. All 3 wore the kind of armor that marked them as experienced killers. "Well, well," the scarred man said with a cruel smile. "Dr. Patricia Brooks, the famous xenobiologist. And this must be your daughter. I'm Captain Rex Stone, and you 2 are going to help me get very rich." Dr. Brooks stepped protectively in front of Lily. "We're researchers, not miners. We don't have access to the mineral deposits. But you do have access to something much more valuable," Captain Stone replied, gesturing to the collection of rare crystals and metals that Ember had brought them. "These samples are worth a fortune on the black market. You're going to tell us exactly where you found them." "We found them scattered around the area," Dr. Brooks said carefully. "There's no specific location." Captain Stone's metal eye glowed red as it scanned the laboratory. "Don't lie to me, Doctor. These crystals come from the deep caves that no human has ever reached. The metal ores are from deposits that our sensors can't even locate. Someone is helping you, and I want to know who. Lily felt a familiar tingle in her mind, distant but growing stronger. Somewhere in the mountains, Ember had sensed danger. The Drake was coming back, and it was bringing the others with it. There's no one else here, Dr. Brooks insisted. Just my daughter and myself. Captain Stone grabbed Dr. Brooks by the arm and shoved her toward his companions. Search the station. Find their equipment and data files. If they won't tell us where the deposits are, we'll figure it out ourselves. As the pirates began ransacking the laboratory, Lily felt Ember's presence growing stronger in her mind. The Drake was still several minutes away, but its emotions were crystal clear. Rage, protective fury, a burning need to defend what belonged to it. The feeling was so intense that Lily gasped and Captain Stone's attention snapped to her. "What's wrong with the girl?" he demanded. "Nothing," Dr. Brooks said quickly. "She's just frightened." But Captain Stone's cybernetic eye was analyzing Lily's vital signs, and something he saw made him suspicious. Interesting. Her neural activity is off the charts, almost like she's in telepathic contact with something. Before Dr. Brooks could respond, a sound echoed across the valley that made all three pirates freeze. It was the hunting call of a shard drake, but magnified and harmonized as four voices joined together. The sound was filled with rage and promise of violence. "What was that?" one of the pirates whispered. Captain Stone's scarred face went pale as he looked out the window. Four shapes were diving out of the purple sky like living missiles, their metallic scales flashing in the alien sunlight. The lead drake, larger and more magnificent than the others, let out another call that seemed to shake the very mountains. "Shard drakes," Captain Stone breathed. "But they don't hunt in groups. They're solitary creatures." The first drake, Ember, hit the ground with enough force to crack the rocky surface. The other three landed around the research station in perfect formation, cutting off all escape routes. Their eyes blazed with protective fury as they focused on the pirate ships. "They're surrounding us," one of Captain Stone's men said, his voice cracking with fear. Ember rose to its full height and looked directly at the laboratory window where Lily stood. Even through the reinforced glass, she could feel the drake's emotions like a physical force, love, loyalty, and a rage so pure and focused that it took her breath away. Captain Stone raised his rifle toward Lily. "I don't know how you're controlling these beasts, but you're going to call them off or your mother dies." That was when Ember lost all restraint. The drake's head snapped back and then shot forward, releasing a stream of crystalline energy that punched through the pirate ship nearest to the station. The entire vessel exploded in a ball of blue fire that lit up the morning sky. The other three drakes attacked simultaneously. One breathed a cone of superheated gas that melted the weapons off the second ship. Another used its claws to tear through the third vessel's armor like it was made of paper. The fourth drake simply picked up the damaged ship and threw it against a cliff face where it shattered like glass. Inside the laboratory, the pirates were paralyzed with terror. These were men who had fought across the galaxy, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for the raw fury of four shard drakes defending their territory. Ember's massive head appeared at the laboratory window, and its golden eyes fixed on Captain Stone. The drake's expression was unmistakably intelligent and filled with deadly promise. When it opened its mouth, everyone could see the crystalline energy building in its throat. "Wait." Captain Stone dropped his rifle and raised his hands. "We surrender. We'll leave immediately." But Ember was beyond negotiation. The drake had seen the pirate threaten Lily, and that was unforgivable. The energy blast that followed turned the entire front wall of the laboratory into a cloud of superheated vapor. When the smoke cleared, Captain Stone and his companions were gone, reduced to atoms by the drake's fury. In the sudden silence that followed, Lily realized she was shaking. Not from fear, but from the intensity of the emotions flowing through her connection with Ember. The drake's rage was fading, replaced by concern for her safety. Dr. Brooks pulled Lily into a protective hug, both of them staring at the massive hole where their laboratory wall used to be. Ember's head appeared in the opening and the creature made a soft, questioning sound. "We're okay," Lily said aloud, and she felt Ember's relief wash over her. But even as the immediate danger passed, Lily knew that everything had changed. The pirates' ships had transmitted distress signals before they were destroyed. Somewhere in space, other ships would have detected the signals and recorded the energy signatures of the drake's weapons. Word would spread across the galaxy about the human research station defended by shard drakes. Questions would be asked about how such a thing was possible, and eventually those questions would reach the wrong ears. Ember nuzzled against Lily's hand with surprising gentleness for such a massive creature. In that moment, she understood that their peaceful life on Drakmor was over. The bond she shared with Ember had just announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Whatever came next, there would be no going back to the simple life of a researcher's daughter. She was something new now, something unprecedented, and the galaxy was about to take notice. The massive warship appeared in Drakmor's sky like a steel mountain blotting out the stars. The Sovereign's Edge was 3 miles long and bristled with enough weapons to crack a planet's surface. As it settled into orbit above the research station, smaller ships began descending like mechanical wasps. Lily watched from the rebuilt laboratory as Admiral Kurt Voss emerged from the lead transport. He was a severe man with silver hair and the kind of bearing that came from decades of commanding others. Behind him marched 24 soldiers in full combat armor, their weapons ready despite the peaceful setting. "Dr. Brooks," Admiral Voss said as he approached the station, "I am Admiral Kurt Voss of the Galactic Federation Hegemony. We need to discuss your daughter's unusual situation." Ember and the other 3 drakes had positioned themselves around the station when the ships first appeared. Now they watched the newcomers with obvious suspicion, their scales catching the purple sunlight like armor made of jewels. Admiral Voss studied them with the cold calculation of a military tactician. "I assume these are the creatures responsible for destroying the pirate vessels," he said. "Remarkable. Our analysis of the wreckage indicates energy output levels that should be impossible for biological organisms." Dr. Brooks stepped forward, placing herself between the Admiral and Lily. "We had a right to defend ourselves. Those pirates attacked us first." "I'm not here about the pirates," Admiral Voss replied, his eyes fixed on Lily. "I'm here because of what our sensors detected during that battle. Energy patterns that match theoretical models for something we thought was extinct." He gestured to one of his soldiers, who activated a holographic projector. Images filled the air between them, showing ancient ruins and strange symbols carved into crystalline walls. The architecture was clearly not human, but it had a beauty that made Lily's breath catch. "This is all that remains of the Keepers," Admiral Voss explained, "a civilization that once spanned this entire sector of the galaxy. According to our research, they achieved perfect symbiosis with the native drake species, creating warriors of unprecedented power." Lily felt Ember stir restlessly behind her. Through their connection, she sensed recognition and something that felt like ancient memory stirring in the drake's mind. "The Keepers disappeared nearly 10,000 years ago," Admiral Voss continued, "but their records speak of individuals capable of forming what they called soul bonds with the drakes. Beings who could share the creature's abilities and coordinate their actions across vast distances." Dr. Brooks was studying the holographic images with scientific fascination. "Are you suggesting that Lily has somehow replicated an extinct alien ability?" "I'm suggesting that your daughter represents a potential threat to galactic stability," Admiral Voss said bluntly. "The Keepers' empire fell because their bonded warriors became too powerful for any government to control. We cannot allow that history to repeat itself." Lily felt a surge of anger from Ember that matched her own. "I haven't threatened anyone," she said. "All I did was help an injured animal. And in doing so, you awakened something that should have remained dormant," Admiral Voss replied. "Our xenobiologists estimate that a fully developed soul bond could coordinate hundreds of drakes simultaneously. An army of such creatures guided by human intelligence would be unstoppable." One of the Admiral's soldiers stepped forward with another device, this one clearly designed for scanning. "Sir, the girl's neural patterns show definite psionic activity. The connection is real and appears to be strengthening." Admiral Voss nodded grimly. "As I suspected. Miss Brooks, you will come with us for study and training. The drake will be sedated and transported to our research facility. With proper guidance, we can teach you to control this ability for the benefit of the Federation." "No," Lily said simply. The word seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Admiral Voss raised an eyebrow, clearly not accustomed to being refused. "This is not a request," he said. "The Hegemony Council has classified you as a strategic asset. Your cooperation is appreciated but not required." That was when Ember moved. The great drake rose to its full height and spread its wings, blocking out the purple sky above them. The other 3 drakes followed suit, creating a wall of living metal and crystal around the research station. Their synchronized movement was so perfectly coordinated that it seemed like a single creature with multiple bodies. "Fascinating," Admiral Voss murmured, apparently unafraid despite the obvious threat. "The bonding process is more advanced than we estimated. Soldier, prepare the neural dampening field." But before the soldier could activate his device, something unexpected happened. The crystalline formations around the research station began to glow. The light started as a faint shimmer but quickly grew brighter, and within moments the entire valley was filled with pulsing blue radiance. Lily gasped as new sensations flooded her mind. It was like suddenly being able to see colors that had never existed before, or hearing music played on instruments from another dimension. The crystals were not just glowing, they were communicating. "The memory crystals," Dr. Brooks whispered in amazement. "They're reacting to Lily's presence." Images began forming in the crystal light, showing scenes from the distant past. Lily saw the keepers as they had lived 10,000 years ago. Tall, graceful beings with silver skin and golden eyes. But more importantly, she saw them working alongside humans who rode magnificent drakes through crystal cities that stretched toward alien stars. "Impossible," Admiral Voss breathed. Humans were barely developing agriculture 10,000 years ago, but the crystal memories told a different story. They showed humans and keepers working together, sharing knowledge and building a civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The human drake riders had not been weapons of war but guardians of peace, using their bonded companions to protect trade routes and explore dangerous regions of space. Through her connection with Ember, Lily began to understand what the crystals were showing her. The keepers had not disappeared because their warriors became too powerful. They had vanished because they gave their lives fighting something far worse than any earthly threat. Something that was still out there, waiting in the dark spaces between the stars. The crystal memories showed the final battle, vast ships of impossible design emerging from holes torn in space itself. The enemy was not alive in any sense that made sense to organic minds, but it consumed life wherever it found it. The keepers and their human allies had sacrificed themselves to seal the breach, but the victory had cost them everything. "The Devourers," Lily whispered, the word coming from memories that were not her own. Admiral Voss went very still. "What did you say?" "They're coming back," Lily said, her voice filled with certainty she could not explain. "The seals are weakening. That's why the crystals are active again. That's why Ember and I found each other. We're supposed to be ready." The Admiral's face had gone pale. "The Devourer threat is classified at the highest levels. How could you possibly know about—" He stopped, staring at Lily with new understanding and growing fear. "The crystals aren't just showing you the past. They're downloading the Keeper's knowledge directly into your mind." Lily nodded, feeling the vast weight of ancient wisdom settling into her thoughts. She understood now why Admiral Voss was afraid. The Federation had built its power on controlling others through superior technology and military force. But the bond she shared with Ember represented something far older and potentially more powerful. "You can't stop this," she told him quietly. "It's already begun. The drakes are awakening across the galaxy, looking for humans who can hear them. The old alliance is being reborn." Admiral Voss looked from Lily to the glowing crystals to the 4 drakes standing guard around them. His hand moved toward his weapon, but he stopped when Ember fixed him with those ancient, intelligent eyes. "This changes nothing," he said finally. "If anything, it makes you more dangerous. The Federation will not allow a return to the chaos of the Keeper era." But even as he spoke, reports were coming in on his communication device. Shard drakes were gathering on worlds across the sector. Ships were reporting strange energy readings from crystal formations that had been dormant for millennia. And somewhere in the deep reaches of space, long-range sensors were detecting movement in regions that should have been empty. The galaxy was waking up, and there was nothing Admiral Voss or the Federation could do to stop it. The bombardment began at midnight, turning Drakmore's purple sky into a canvas of fire and destruction. Admiral Voss had returned to his flagship with promises of negotiation, but Lily knew better. Through her growing connection with the Crystal Network, she could feel the massive weapon systems charging above them. "They're not trying to capture me anymore," she told her mother, as energy beams carved glowing scars across the valley floor. "They've decided I'm too dangerous to live." Dr. Brooks pulled Lily deeper into the reinforced shelter they had built beneath the research station. The emergency beacon is active. Earth will send help when they receive our signal. But Lily knew help would come too late. The Sovereign's Edge carried enough firepower to sterilize the planet's surface. Admiral Voss had clearly decided that eliminating the threat was more important than studying it. Above them, she could hear Ember and the other drakes calling to each other in the ancient language of their kind. The sounds were filled with rage and defiance, but also with something else. They were calling to their kin across the planet, summoning them to war. Through the crystal network, Lily felt the response. Dozens of drakes were rising from their mountain caves and deep ocean trenches. They came from every corner of Drakmor, their massive wings carrying them toward the research station where their new alliance with humanity was under attack. But it was not enough. No matter how many drakes answered the call, they could not reach orbit to strike back at the Federation ships. Admiral Voss could simply stay in space and rain destruction down upon them until nothing remained alive on the planet's surface. That was when Lily felt something change within herself. The crystal knowledge that had been slowly integrating into her mind suddenly surged forward like a dam bursting. Ancient memories flooded her consciousness, showing her abilities that the first human drake riders had possessed. "Lily?" her mother said, alarmed by the girl's suddenly distant expression. But Lily was no longer entirely herself. 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge and experience were flowing through her mind, teaching her things that no human alive should know. She understood now why the Keepers had chosen to work with humans rather than any other species. Human minds were uniquely adaptable, capable of forming connections that other races could not achieve. She reached out with her consciousness, following the crystal network that connected every drake on Drakmor. One by one, she touched their minds and felt their instant recognition. They had been waiting for this moment, waiting for a human to awaken the old bonds and unite them once again. The change in the drakes was immediate and dramatic. Instead of flying individually toward the research station, they began moving in perfect formation. Wings that had never coordinated before now beat in exact synchronization. Minds that had always been solitary suddenly shared thoughts and purpose. Through Ember, Lily could see the Federation fleet hanging in orbit like metal vultures. Admiral Voss had brought enough ships to conquer a major world, but he had not counted on facing an enemy that could coordinate its actions with perfect precision. "What are you doing?" Dr. Brooks asked, watching her daughter's face transform with alien knowledge. "What I was born to do," Lily replied, her voice carrying harmonics that had not been there before. "What humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. I'm improvising." She closed her eyes and reached deeper into the crystal network, extending her consciousness beyond Drakmor itself. The ancient Keeper civilization had connected every world in this sector through crystalline resonance networks. Most of those connections had been dormant for millennia, but they were still there waiting to be reactivated. On world after world, crystal formations began to glow as Lily's awakening consciousness touched them. And on each of those worlds, shard drakes felt the call to war echoing through their ancestral memories. Admiral Voss first realized something was wrong when his sensors detected massive energy signatures rising from the planet's surface. The drakes were not just gathering. They were somehow drawing power directly from Drakmor's crystal core. Energy levels that should have been impossible for biological creatures were climbing toward readings that matched small starships. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting coordinated movement among all drake populations across the planet. They're not acting like animals anymore." Admiral Voss studied the sensor displays with growing unease. "What do you mean?" "They're flying in military formation, sir. Perfect attack vectors and synchronized timing. It's like they're being controlled by a single tactical mind." That was when the first wave hit the Federation fleet. 50 drakes flying in a formation that would have impressed any military academy rose from Drakmor's atmosphere like living missiles. Their crystalline breath weapons fired in perfect sequence, creating a concentrated barrage that overwhelmed the shields of the nearest destroyer. But the real shock came when the drakes did not stop at atmosphere. Instead of falling back to the planet, they continued climbing into space itself. The creature's scales were somehow protecting them from the vacuum, and they moved through the void with the same grace they showed in planetary skies. "Impossible," Admiral Voss breathed. "Shard drakes are atmospheric creatures. They can't survive in space. But survive they did, and more than that, they thrived. In the vacuum of space, the drakes could maneuver in 3 dimensions without the limitations of gravity or air resistance. They became even more dangerous, diving and weaving through the Federation fleet like predators hunting among a school of fish. The second wave of drakes came from outside the system entirely. Ships began detecting massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace jump points. Creatures that had flown between the stars in the Age of the Keepers were remembering how to travel the ancient paths between worlds. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving reports from across the sector. Drake populations are going active on 17 different worlds. They're coordinating attacks on any Federation vessels they encounter." Admiral Voss realized that he had made a terrible mistake. By trying to eliminate Lily Brooks, he had triggered exactly the kind of awakening the Federation had sought to prevent. But now it was too late to change course. "All weapons target the research station," he ordered. "If we can eliminate the girl, the coordination should collapse." But as his ships prepared to fire, something unprecedented happened. The drakes in space suddenly grouped together and began to glow with the same crystalline energy as their breath weapons. The light spread from creature to creature until the entire swarm was blazing like a constellation. Then they fired as one. Hundreds of energy beams converged on the Sovereign's edge, striking with the combined force of a solar flare. The massive warship's shields collapsed instantly, and secondary explosions began rippling along its hull. Down on Drakmore's surface, Lily felt the moment of victory through her connection with Ember. But she also felt something else. The effort of coordinating so many drakes across such vast distances was burning through her human nervous system like wildfire. The ancient memories had given her the knowledge to create this unity, but her 16-year-old brain was not designed to handle such power. "Lily," her mother called out, catching her as she swayed. Blood was trickling from Lily's nose, and her eyes had taken on a golden tint that matched Ember's. She was changing, becoming something more than human, but perhaps less than what she had been. "The Keepers faced the same choice," she whispered. "Power enough to protect the galaxy, but at the cost of what made them who they were." Through the crystal network, she could feel the drakes waiting for her next command. They had defeated Admiral Voss's fleet, but more ships would come. The Federation would not accept this challenge to their authority. But Lily Brooks, the girl who had pulled a thorn from a drake's nose, was no longer thinking like a frightened teenager. Ancient wisdom flowed through her mind, showing her possibilities that stretched across the galaxy and forward through centuries of time. The real war was just beginning, and she intended to win it. 6 months after the battle above Drakmore, Lily stood on a platform carved from living crystal, watching ships from a dozen different species arrive for the Galactic Assembly. But she was no longer the same girl who had helped an injured drake. The golden light in her eyes had become permanent, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through the crystal network spanning half the galaxy. The victory over Admiral Voss's fleet had been just the beginning. Word of the human girl who commanded shard drakes had spread across civilized space faster than any government could suppress it. Species that had suffered under Federation rule for centuries began to whisper about the return of the ancient alliance. Pirates fled systems where drakes had been sighted. Corrupt governors found their world surrounded by creatures that could travel between stars without ships. But the changes went deeper than military might. Lily's awakening had triggered something fundamental in both humans and drakes. Across human space, children were reporting dreams of flying on crystal wings. Drake populations that had been declining for millennia were suddenly thriving, as if some essential element had been restored to their existence. Ember landed beside the platform with grace that still took Lily's breath away. The great drake had grown even larger since their bond deepened, now nearly 30 feet from nose to tail. But more than size had changed. Intelligence blazed in those golden eyes, and when Ember spoke through their mental link, the thoughts were complex and sophisticated. "The representatives from the hegemony worlds are afraid," Ember observed, settling beside Lily like a living mountain of metal and crystal. "They expected to negotiate with a human child, not the inheritor of Keeper wisdom." Lily nodded, feeling the emotions of everyone in the great chamber through the expanded consciousness she now possessed. The crystal network had grown to encompass 17 star systems, and through it she could sense the thoughts and feelings of millions of bonded pairs. Humans and drakes were finding each other across the galaxy, drawn together by instincts older than recorded history. "They should be afraid," she replied. "The galaxy they controlled is ending." The first speaker was Ambassador Helen Price from Earth's Colonial Authority. The woman had traveled across the galaxy to understand what her daughter had become, and the mixture of pride and concern in her emotions was clear to Lily's enhanced perceptions. "The Human Colonial Authority recognizes the sovereignty of the Drakmor Alliance," Ambassador Price announced formally. "We propose a treaty of mutual cooperation and defense." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Earth's recognition of Lily's authority legitimized her position in galactic politics. No longer could the Federation dismiss her as a terrorist or criminal. But the real surprise came from an unexpected source. The delegate from the Centaurian Trade Consortium, a species that had remained neutral in galactic conflicts for over 1,000 years, stood to address the assembly. "The consortium has discovered ancient records in our deepest archives," the insectoid being announced through its translation device. "Records that speak of the time of joining, when the barriers between species dissolved and new forms of cooperation became possible. We believe that time has come again." Lily felt a surge of recognition through the crystal network. The Centaurians had been allies of the Keepers in the ancient days, though their own bonding abilities had been limited. Now their descendants were offering to join the new alliance. One by one, other species began to step forward. The crystalline beings of the Silicon Reach who communicated through harmonic resonances. The aquatic deepers, whose world ocean had hidden drake colonies for millennia. Even some of the Federation's client species were secretly sending representatives, testing the waters for possible defection. But it was the arrival of the last delegate that truly changed everything. A ship unlike any other descended through Drakmor's atmosphere, its design flowing and organic rather than mechanical. When the hatch opened, a figure emerged that made every being in the chamber fall silent. It was a keeper. The being was tall and graceful, with the silver skin and golden eyes that Lily had seen in the crystal memories. But this was no ancient recording. This was a living survivor of the supposedly extinct civilization. "I am called Starweaver," the keeper said, its voice carrying the same harmonics that had touched Lily's speech. "I speak for the remnant, those of my people who have watched and waited in the deep places between stars. We have returned because the seal of endings grows weak." Through the crystal network, Lily felt a chill of recognition. The Devourers, the enemy that had destroyed the Keeper civilization, were stirring in their prison between dimensions. The awakening of the Drake bonds had not been coincidence but necessity. "How long do we have?" Lily asked, though part of her already knew the answer. 5 years, Starweaver replied. "Perhaps less. The barriers that separate our reality from theirs were never meant to last forever. We hoped that the bonded races would be ready when the time came." The chamber erupted in confused voices as delegates tried to understand what they were hearing. But Lily felt only calm determination. The crystal memories had shown her glimpses of the coming war, and she had been preparing for this moment since the day she pulled the thorn from Ember's nostril. "Then we need to be ready," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with crystalline clarity. "Not just humans and drakes, but all the free peoples of the galaxy." Over the following hours, the shape of the new alliance began to emerge. Species that had never worked together found common ground in the face of an existential threat. The Federation's rigid hierarchies crumbled as world after world declared independence and joined the growing coalition. But the real change was happening on a more fundamental level. The bonding between humans and drakes was creating new forms of consciousness that neither species could achieve alone. Children born since the awakening showed abilities that defied conventional understanding. They could communicate across vast distances without technology, sense the health of entire ecosystems, and understand the deepest patterns that connected all living things. As the assembly concluded and the delegates began to depart, Lily remained on the crystal platform with Ember. Through their bond, she could feel the drake's contentment at the day's work. But she could also sense deeper currents, the vast network of consciousness that now spanned dozens of worlds. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Ember asked through their mental link. Lily looked up at the stars beginning to appear in Drakmor's purple sky. Somewhere out there, in the spaces between realities, ancient enemies were testing the barriers that held them back. But she was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled across an injured drake. She was something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. We pulled the thorn from more than just your nostril, she said, running her hand along Ember's warm scales. We pulled it from the galaxy itself. The infection that kept the free peoples apart, the fear that made cooperation impossible. Through the crystal network, she felt the agreement of thousands of bonded pairs. Humans and drakes working together across the stars, building something unprecedented. Not an empire based on conquest, but a true alliance founded on mutual understanding and shared purpose. The Federation still existed, but its power was broken. Species that had been subjects were becoming partners. Worlds that had been resources were becoming allies. And at the center of it all, the bond between a human girl and her drake continued to grow stronger. When the Devourers finally broke through their prison, they would find a galaxy very different from the one they had sought to consume 10,000 years ago. They would face not scattered, competing civilizations, but a unified alliance of species that had learned to fight as one. Lily Brooks had pulled a thorn from a drake's nostril and gained a protector. But in doing so, she had awakened something far greater than herself. She had reminded the galaxy that the greatest strength came not from domination, but from the bonds of loyalty and love that connected all living things. The new dawn was breaking across the stars, and nothing would ever be the same.